Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast comes in response to the podcast we did a couple of weeks ago on my 40th and the transition into my 40s. And this one is in a slightly extended conversation as a beautiful listener wrote into us and just shared parts of her experience and what she'd love us to dive a little bit deeper on, which of course we loved.
We've both got pages of notes. So
that is what we love. We love knowing when we've sent something out into the ether that it's had a ripple, it's affected you in some way, it's opened you up, it's touched your heart, it's hit a chord. You know, I mean, that is just so wonderful for us to receive because mostly we have no idea.
Yeah, until someone reaches out and go, hey,
yeah,
it is. Yeah.
So we're super grateful to this beautiful listener. Do you want to give us a summation of that email?
I might read it. Are we cool with that?
I'm cool with that.
All right. We have not identified this listener, so I'm sure they don't mind if we read it out loud. After hearing Julie speak about her 40th and the body image things she wasn't taking with her as she crossed this threshold, I'm wondering if you and Julie would be open to riffing on the podcast about body image and how you've navigated this over the years, and intimacy in a relationship and the tools you have both used to make intimacy a priority with multiple kids. This podcast rang true for me as I am in the 3 years before my 40th. So am I. And I have done so much work on body image and acceptance, but since having baby number 3 nearly 6 months ago, old conditioning and ideas of what I should look like have resurfaced. And I know this is something I want to work on before I enter my 40s.
Mm.
That's it.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. And she goes on to say, how did you consciously create it? When we had our thirds and fourths, when you have more children and there's just more pressure, there's more responsibility, there's, more exhaustion. How did you actually create that as a priority?
Yeah. So I can see maybe there's a couple of ways that we need to almost kind of like split this conversation into. Mm-hmm. One is obviously the body conversation, and body image and nakedness. Mm-hmm. And sharing of your body with another. And one is intimacy in the throes of intensive parenting.
Yeah. Beautiful. So let's do that.
Kind of two forks.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you like to start, Bridgie?
Oh, body image. I think it's important, I think, with body image to recognize how externally created our body image is.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of, every reflection that we see of a beautiful woman in our media, in our culture, is largely airbrushed, doesn't have skin imperfections, doesn't, have struggles, right? Really.
Yeah.
Like in terms of what we see culturally represented, it is just like it's an illusion, right? So we have that we're looking at all of the time. And then what we also have is the reality that having children tends to and raising children tends to coincide with key shifts in our aging process. Because once you hit your kind of mid to late 30s, your skin elasticity changes.
Yeah, it's significant.
Like that's significant. You're, potentially not moving weight the way you might have moved weight off your body. Yeah. Everything, you're probably feeling more achy. Like there's just things don't quite look and feel the way that they felt in your mid-20s.
Yeah.
And what happens is we then compare ourselves to our pre-kid body, which was also a much younger body. So not only are we comparing ourselves to this internalized body image from everything that we look at around us, we're also comparing ourselves to our much younger self, which also had very different responsibilities and all of this stuff. Yeah. So I don't think you can talk about body image without also having a context for it like that.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, I think you and I are just going to be gushing over this entire conversation because you and I both feel those particularly media-based narratives as so deeply damaging to the psyche of so many.
Yeah.
And particularly as we're raising humans, as we move ourselves through the evolution of children and aging and everything that comes with that, and particularly in the advent of social media too, right? Like
and your children too, who are going to bring up all your stuff.
Yeah. Yes. So true. Who are going to bring up all your stuff.
And who are also, as they stretch into this internalized, and stretch into this world where they're seeing body image reflected to them.
Yeah.
They're then, seeing, like my 5-year-old's, like she said the other day, like when I turn 6, will my skin get darker? Excuse me.
Based on filters and whatnot that she sees.
More like she's now noticing she has really pale skin and she has to care for it in ways that she doesn't see her brother need to care for his skin. She doesn't see her best friend need to care for her skin. And it feels like a burden. And it feels like something that part of her wants to change. And she's 5, right? So that's happening at 5. We're in our mid-30s, 40s. How many years have we had? Right? So no wonder it's so internalized.
Yeah. Yes. And I just love there's that Instagram, I think it says it Dame Mercer, and I love how she just does all the time these reels on online is curated. And so she does the reels on all of the hacks and all of the filters. And I actually love dipping into her feed because I just think, it's such a wonderful reminder.
Reality check. And
right, just the curation.
And I'm a sucker for a filter too because I'm like, I like how my skin looks in that filter. I like that. I like that tone.
Yeah. I get it. I love a filter too.
Yeah.
But as long as it doesn't, then it's a tool for you to play with.
Yes. Not like something that you need.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I also think it's really worth remembering, as we remember all of the time in all of my spaces, that our version of body image and what is beautiful is completely learned. What is beautiful has changed over every single decade, over every single century, over different cultures and countries. The ideal beauty or the form of what is most beholden as most beautiful, a representation of most beautiful, has changed continuously, which says to you there is no one ideal. It's what fits culture and narrative of that particular era, time, culture, place, so on and so forth. So we have to recognize that to begin with. So right now, then what the idealized beauty is doesn't mean that is only this narrowly defined, you fit this and you're beautiful and nothing else is, versus the feminine that goes, beauty is on an infinite spectrum. Like there's nothing you can't find beauty in.
Yeah.
Right? Like the most ugly and torturous moment or, human, there's something that you can find beauty in. That ugly pile of clothes in the corner, there's something you can find beauty in. When you're looking at something through the lens of beauty, right? Yeah. Versus the lens of what's so wrong with you because you're in comparison to what I have learned or am beholding as a standard. So I think we have to be really careful of learned beauty versus true beauty and recognize it for the fallacy and the marketing genius that it is.
Yeah. And largely decided by, like a handful of people, likely men in suits in some kind of ivory tower.
Right. The male gaze.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, let's just take a minute to think about the male gaze and how that is curated versions of woman through even the eyes of women now.
Yeah, because women have internalized the male gaze, because the male gaze is what forms. When I was at uni, we did film theory, and so much of it was on the male gaze and looking at how much film has been orchestrated and arranged through the male gaze. And so then we watch that, and of course, art enters our subconscious, which then becomes narrative that we take on and then throw out into the world and bring back to ourselves, right?
Yeah, right.
Lasso.
Yeah. And add on to this that we are somewhat a body, beauty, and fat obsessed culture.
Yeah.
And we seem to perceive that it's okay to comment on other people's bodies and the differences in bodies. Let me just give you an example, Bridgie, while I'm here. Shall I give you one from just yesterday?
I can see it coming, so let's bring it.
So I went and got a coffee from our local shopping centre, and I love this coffee. And I walked up as a different barista, and I walk up and I'm with Nick, and this guy turns around and he goes, "Whoa, you guys are so tall." I'm having that out-of-body moment because this happens so much in my life where I have this moment where I'm like, 15, 20 years ago, that would have crushed me. Like that would have sent me into a spiral of self-hatred for all of the ways that I didn't fit the beautiful, petite, tiny little woman because I was everything but. And so that would have sent me on a spiral in this comparison that was continuously the fact that, it's okay to say that. Is it? To comment on someone else's body? And so I've learned how to hold myself in that. So I just regulate and I smile. I said, yeah. Like, what else is there to say? Yes, we are.
There's nothing else to say to that.
No, you're like really tall.
Oh, did he keep going?
Yeah. No, this continues, Bridget.
Oh, God.
Yeah. We are. I just want to order. I'm thinking in my head, I just want to order a fucking coffee. He goes, "Whoa, what are you, like 6'6"? And at this point, I'm thinking, oh, for God's sake. I was like, I'm 6'1". And he goes, no, you're not. You're not 6'1". And I said, they're going, yeah, I am. He goes, no, you're not. You're like way taller than me. And I looked him in the end. I threw my hands up. I went, I don't know what you want from me. I don't know what I can tell you. I'm 6'1". I'm not sure what else there is to say to you. He's 6'6". I don't know. Like, what do you want? Yeah. And then he just kind of like composed himself. What would you like? So I was thinking, what the fuck? What the fuck? Because I wouldn't walk up to you and go, oh my God, you're so short. Yeah, you're so fat. What size are you? No, you're not. No, you're not. You're clearly bigger. Oh my God, look how big your boobs are. What size are they? No, they're not. They're clearly bigger. Like, what the fuck?
But yet I think tall, there seems to be like, a feeling that like calling someone tall is not an insult. Like, that's potentially people's general narrative. But for you, like, it comes from a whole history and story of feeling incredibly insulting.
Yeah, totally. So it just, though, reminds me constantly of the freedom that we all perceive we have to comment on someone else's physiology in whatever form that is.
Yeah.
We do not have a right to comment on anybody else's body, full stop, the end.
But it's amazing how internalized that is too. Like, it's just...
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah. It is. And I mean, the amount of time that people will say, oh, you look great, when it kind of often means you've lost weight or something, right? Like, what that'll mean. There's something behind that. They might not actually say that, but that's what the meaning is. And that is, again, the internalized measures of what is beauty or what is deemed acceptable, right? Or, socially celebrated by diet culture, for example, which many people have internalized because it's been around for, what, 40 years or something?
Yeah, totally. So what I want to say here, though, is that I think it's probably worth you and I talking about maybe the experiences that we ourselves have moved through with body image, because it's certainly not been effortless for either of us. So I think maybe it is worth looking at that. And I was really sitting with this listener's email and just really feeling into myself in her story, and particularly the self within me that struggled, particularly more so with babies 1 and 2. I think I'd done enough work and had more tools and ways of being and belonging by baby 3 and 4 that was more easeful, but I can certainly picture being exactly where she was at babies 1 and 2 for me. And I remember having a huge epiphany when it came to that self-flagellation, or that speaking negatively towards myself and my body, was that I was almost doing this yo-yo between hating, saying disgusting things to my body, the continuous taking of it down, and then this also feeling like that was so hard and wrong and didn't want to be there, to its exact opposite. I'm amazing, feminist spaces, women's embodiment spaces, everything is so beautiful, and yet yo-yoing between the two, not actually kind of finding who I was in the middle that could hold both of those. And I remember really clearly having this epiphany and this drop-in moment where it just kind of made sense to me, when I realized I was so in for body worship and goddess worship and feminine worship. And if I was the living embodiment of the greater her, then this body then becomes something that's sacred. And I realized that I couldn't consecrate what is sacred over and over and ritualize it every day and pray to it and with it and for it and all of the things, while also desecrating it. Because you cannot desecrate and consecrate in the same moment, or in the same, you can't.
Yeah.
So I'm always
choosing one or the other.
Yeah. Am I desecrating this sacred space, or am I consecrating this sacred space? Because I can't do both. So when that really dropped in for me, I remembered really having this switch of so what is my commitment to my body then? I know where I've come from. I know the beliefs, I know the paradigms, I know the nasty things that are in my head and my belief system. I know, but I can also choose. It's my mind. I can choose what I carry forwards and what my commitment is to allowing and not allowing certain thoughts to enter. Because we still have power over that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I wanted you to sink into for this listener and for any of us who are traversing this is, what benefits are you getting from speaking negatively to your body or about your body? Because you better believe it, you're getting benefits. And I was thinking about the benefits that I had gotten when I was doing that on repeat. And I wrote a few of them down, so I thought it was worth sharing. That when I spoke negatively about my own body, it was a way internally for myself to justify my shy away or turn away from intimacy. So I didn't have to enter intimacy or awkwardness or be with all of the pent-up stuff between Nick and I, or in my own body, because, I was just so shit in my body and so ugly and unattractive and all of the things that I just I could justify why I wouldn't even go there, right? But that's a benefit. For me as a mum, that's a benefit when I'm not also putting pressure on myself to look, to know, to feel, to move through. I'm not also doing that. It's a huge benefit. Women will bond over talking negatively about their bodies. Yeah. So it could become a playground for bonding with girlfriends and strengthening those relationships. That in some perverse way, it allowed me to focus on my health through punishment. Yeah. I remember some of my friends used to call it willpower. I had so much willpower. And I sit back and think, did I? Or was just a lot of grit
You're just really good at punishing yourself.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And what I realized in the punishment was that even in the punishment, even in the takedowns and the nasty barbs that I would throw at myself, and no one can speak worse about you than yourself.
Yeah.
Like no one, right? That even in that punishment was actually release and relief. Because even in that flagellation, it's almost like that cat of nine tails. And every time I would whip myself, even though there were pain, it was almost like it would elicit a little bit of relief of the pain that was stuck there. It's almost like I could feel it. There was a reason to feel something. And in that, it could be released. Like it's genius manifestation, right?
It's a little bit like disordered eating in a way.
Yeah, totally. And I could see that as a way of obsessing on my body, that it stopped me from focusing on what didn't feel right in my life or in my relationship. And I still know this is a strategy that my subconscious uses. The more I fastidiously focus in on my body, the more I'm actually avoiding the big fucking shit in my life. I'm so busy with the fucking punitive shit of cultural idealized beauty, right? The cultural lie. Like, let's keep you women so busy on beauty and bodies. You don't have time to dedicate yourself to what matters, to career, to government, to change, to power, to you don't have time because
to all of these actual things, which
right,
you might tear down.
Right. So I just such a genius strategy of patriarchy in general, right? Keeps you so busy, focused on this shitty stuff because you're never quite right, you never fit in, you're never good enough. So it's this busying when really there's bigger shit that you're just not using your power on. And I can see that it was also a way of the more I obsess on my body, the more it's almost a way of like someone who would tear at their fingernails or pick at a scab, or it's a way of distracting myself with just enough pain so I don't use my energy where it would be better served on the bigger stuff that's out of alignment in my life. That feels harder on some level. So I could see all of the ways, and I'm sure if I kept going, I would find more, but I can totally feel into all of the benefits that speaking negatively about and towards my own body were providing me. So when I could see that, even in the desecration, I'm going to kind of undo what I said, but I could see even in the desecration, I was trying to do some sort of effort at consecration. It wasn't particularly deep, but I was trying. So I could love myself enough for that. I didn't need to judge myself. I didn't need to be more punishment on top of punishment, I could see the strategies, I guess is what I'm saying. So I could love myself in those. And I could ask myself, how can I give myself these things without needing to take myself down in the process to do it? How can I bond with my girlfriends that doesn't have to do with a shared experience of body negativity? How could I be with the feelings that are pent up in my body so I don't need to enter pain through punishment to enter them? When I'm obsessing, because I see that as a sign to look, to overview, to reconcile my life, because something's not right and my intuition's trying to come through and I'm trying to silence it. Can I use it as a form of empowerment and reconciliation to direct my energy where it's best spent? And instead of using it as a reason why I can't have pleasure, intimacy, be seen naked, be fully open and ecstatic, because you cannot be controlled and ecstatic. They are literally a juxtaposition. You can't. You can't be controlled and have ecstasy.
They're two like opposite sides of.
Yeah. So instead of using it as the reason why I don't want to enter intimacy, I got, for a couple of years, my practice was awkwardness. Is I would follow the awkwardness. Where I felt awkwardness, I would go. That the more I followed the awkwardness, the more I could see where I had put my own self-sabotage and glass ceilings on myself. So by following the awkwardness and the thing that I really wanted to shy away from and would have 1,000 reasons and excuses that I could justify mentally to explain it all away, you know, how we are so good at doing that. My practice was literally to my awkwardness. Okay, come on, Julie, big girl pants on, because the more awkward moments you have, the less you have.
I love that. I remember when you were saying that.
Yeah, do you remember that? It was a couple of years where I was like really invested in that statement. The more awkward moments, the less you have. So instead of doing that step back from awkward intimacy, I learned how to hold myself in awkward intimacy. And the amazing thing to me,
so potent,
right? And the amazing thing to me still is when I follow the awkwardness, it always leads me to ecstasy.
Because there's more expansion on the other side of awkwardness. Because you've gone to a place we haven't been before.
Yeah.
Usually you just, avoid it.
Yeah. And the thing with intimacy is, unfortunately, the longer we leave it, the more awkward it gets.
Yeah. Because there's so much more time and stuff under the bridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by Honey Club and Reimagining Motherhood. Your spaces for intimacy and feminine embodiment and conscious parenting and inspiring motherhood. Come join us at julietanner.love and bridgetwood.life.
What about you? So I've just done a huge riff on my journey. What was yours?
Yeah, I would say for me, body image stuff post-babies has been directed more towards a particular part of my body. So, I've been fortunate, or fortunate or unfortunate, whatever, there's equal benefits and drawbacks, but my body has carried pregnancies okay, but the size of my babies has meant that I've developed an umbilical hernia. And so I have this protruding hernia, where my intestine comes out, goes through my belly button. And that for me is a source of shame in my body. I really have to work with being with what I see as the ugliness of that part of my body and allow it to be loved. I continue to struggle with that. And I think it's almost kind of coming out more now that I move past the baby growing years and recognize that this is actually a part of my body I'm going to need to do something about. Probably for health reasons, really. But that in that also recognize there's going to be cosmetic changes. And am I also okay with that, right? Because I'm staring at what I think is ugliness, but I also know the inherent beauty in this ugliness because of what has been created. My body has had to expand and shift and change and stretch. And I wouldn't take back any of that, because that's a story of my body and the babies it's carried. And so there's a bittersweetness for me in looking at, the changes that are going to happen to that part of my body, because it tells a story that I don't want to not have told by my body, if you know what I mean. So for me, being with that part of my body is a practice of massage and again, seeing, making sure that I'm seeing more and more real stomachs, not washboard ones or perfect little bellies with no belly button, right? Perfect little innies, just having to get over all of the, ads that would fill my head as a teen of Billabong and every model and all of their stomachs and again all of this false narrative of what beauty is or what desire is in a woman, right? And embrace real postpartum stomachs, right? And just love mine for the story that it tells and for the way that it's growing and aging, and there's more to hold on to, and all of that stuff. But for me, it's a practice, and so in intimacy, my husband knows that that's a vulnerable part of my body for me, and so he puts extra attention on loving that for me because it helps me be more accepting of it, which is really beautiful, and I really appreciate, because that helps me feel less exposed, I suppose, and more able to fully be in my body. Like, as you say, like to be less controlled and less contained because it's accepted.
Mm.
But that's a practice of me accepting that and loving into that as I rub my body in oil and as I look at myself in the mirror. Like it's a two-part process, him accepting it and showering me in that love, because I'm really practicing doing that for myself too.
Mm. I just kind of love that, because I think, because as you know, you have the umbilical hernia, I have the vaginal prolapse.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. That's still something I'm working with as well. But what I love is just what you touched on there, which is we don't have to carry this silent shame that I rarely think we can ever truly see ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, because we are always looking at ourselves through so many filters, we can never, I'm not sure we can ever really see ourselves until we're willing to see ourselves through the eyes of someone who loves us.
Yeah. God.
So until we're willing to see ourselves as our partner does, not, you know, they go, oh, you're so beautiful. And you go, yeah, well, you have to say that, as a way of protecting and shutting down and shutting off. Like, okay, what if your story is bullshit and not true? What if you really are beautiful? What if your partner really does not care about the whatever and actually really finds you beautiful and attractive and sexy? Like, what if that's actually more true than the story that you're so used to running?
Yeah.
So the practice of letting ourselves feel ourselves through the eyes of our lover, I think is the greatest practice any of us could do when it comes to body love and intimacy. And that you never have to do this alone. I would hope that you have chosen a partner who loves you and wants to love you into being the greatest version you can be. So I would hope you're with someone and you've chosen someone who wants to make that better for you, who wants and is invested in you seeing yourself the way that they do, and that's an elevation. So you don't have to do it alone, but you do have to enter awkwardness and say, you know, there's this thing.
Yeah.
There's this pink elephant in the room, which I'm sure everybody knows that's, you know, involved in intimacy here anyway.
And when the reality is your partner's feeling it anyway, because they feel where you contract.
Yeah.
And you contract in those places.
Yeah. So the point of what Bridget said is you have to find it and love it for yourself to begin changing your own narrative and connection with your own part, aspect, piece, whole body, whatever it is for you. And the purpose of doing that is to find what you need. You can't say to your partner, I need you to make me feel better, when you're not invested in changing your own narrative and making yourself feel better.
Yeah.
And knowing what works for you and what you do need and what you don't want, right? Like, you got to know that stuff. It's okay to step it out. It's okay for it to go slow. It's okay for it to begin awkward and see where we end up. And I would add on to that if you need a bridge between where you are now to where you want to be, you get to have one. This is not a case of I am only worthy when I'm fully open and naked and in love and in rapture with my body. That's when I'm worthy. That's not true. You get to be worthy right where you are now. And if what you need is some little bridges to help you feel that, recognize that, sink into different layers of comfort with that, then that's what you need. For me, that's been things like, okay, you know, while I'm learning how to love this extra flesh and the way that my skin folds move on my belly, what I would love is just a super tight, cute teddy that just puts lace over that area. As I learn how to take a step between you can't touch it and look at it to I don't care how it moves. See me in all of my glorious fleshiness and nakedness, right? Like you get to have the teddy in the middle. Or the corset.
Yeah.
Whatever it is for you. For me, for a period of time when I was learning how to love my boobs, it was a fucking push-up bra. And in my head, I had concocted this story about how I wasn't allowed to have a push-up bra because that was somehow false advertising or faking it. As opposed to, I have these glorious tits, how about we just decorate them so they're even more glorious? And I remember how much fun they are.
Such a great invitation. I love it.
We just get to have a bridge.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be black and white.
And it also keeps it unfolding and interesting and as well because you're playing with it. You're playing with your own edges.
Yeah.
It gets to be an invitation.
Yeah, and you've got to dress for you, particularly in intimacy, particularly when you're struggling, you've got to dress with your own turn on. Like I wouldn't enter a situation with a motor that's starting on 0 or -10. I'm entering intimacy. I'm bringing my own turn on for myself to the intimacy plate with Nick. So I might already be a 20 or a 30 or a 50.
And this is a great segue into the next part, which is how to make space for that. Like how to actually like do that. And I had this analogy, which I know that you loved, which was like, you know, because, right, like there's a baby that you're breastfeeding through the night, right? And it can feel like intimacy is the last thing that you want. And so I said, like, well, like, what have I said here? I feel completely like I'm just built it up and then I've lost my train of thought.
What you were saying when you were retelling it to me, what you were saying was, you know, it's just like when we have screaming babies at night. Like we're not going to just leave them to be crying on their own.
Yeah, we're going to tend to them.
Yeah, we're going to tend to them. We don't even necessarily want to. We might drag our tired asses out of bed, all of the things, but we actually fucking show up.
Yeah. And so that was the thing that I committed to after I had Pearl, which I think I mentioned. I was also in a round of Queen's School when she must have been, I don't know, 4 or 6 months old. And it was beautiful because I knew how much I needed an environment to help me open.
Fuck yeah. Actually, I'm so glad you said this because this is one of the things I was thinking too, is we actually have to be careful who we put ourselves in the space of. Because what you don't want to do is be the smartest person in the room and therefore you stay in your own reality, or be in the company of people who totally support and are living your current way of life.
Yeah.
Because there's no change possible for you.
No, because you look around, everybody's got the same old, like the same level of mediocre or the same level of just surviving.
Yeah, and it just is like that's reality.
Yeah, that you know, postpartum is a time when you just have to shove your relationship to the side. And I actually see this a lot on social media, like a lot of like legitimizing the I don't have time for you kind of narrative of motherhood with young children. And I get it. And it also kind of breaks my heart because I think our men and our partners, male or female, want ways in and often don't know ways in. But if we're talking about intimacy, in the case of, you know, what I needed, because remember, you've got so many of your oxytocin needs met by your baby, right? Like breastfeeding is filling you up. So in your body, you might not feel at all like intimacy, like more touch. That's why you need your environment to do a lot of work for you to help you desire that. And so one night I remember like Marcus had come out from feeding Pearl and he had like set up our lounge room. Like he'd pulled cushions off the couch. He'd like cover them in like soft mink blankets. He'd put like candles all around. He'd put music on, like he just set it all up. And so I was like, first of all, like swooning by when I walked out and saw it. And particularly when we were kind of relearning my body then, and like he had a bit of PTSD from seeing Pearl be born. So we had to, you know, like reorient to each other in intimacy again. And So he would give me a massage before, like, kind of anything else. And so it got to the point where, like, after that massage, I was so turned on and open that we could go from, like, sex to Pearl waking up and me go and breastfeed her and me come right back and pick up where I was at off, like pick straight up from where I was at, because I had been so gently and nourishingly led to where my body felt safe to open and yearn to open, that I could even be pulled back into the mother role and go back to, like, intimacy. And that's when I was like, fuck, like, you can have both. Right.
Yeah. But that's the next step, mastery, I think. I think first off, you've got to create the space. I see it as these steps, is that first off, it's almost like you go, it's one or the other. I'm seductress or I'm mother.
Yes.
I can't be seductress because right now I'm so invested in mother.
Yeah.
Versus then you get to a point probably with enough pain that you go, no, I miss my seductress. I miss being taken. I miss the release of my body. I miss the openness. I miss us. I miss the connection, whatever it is. And you start to go, okay, I need to carve out time in which to enter my seductress. So to leave mother and put her to bed and awaken and open sleeping beauty of the seductress. And then once you've mastered the on and the off and the switch, I think the next level mastery is the fluidity where there is no separation.
Yeah.
Which is what I hear in your story.
Yeah. And I got to say, that wouldn't be every time, but particularly, like, as you say, like, my seductress was so enabled that I could then feel like I could.
Right. But that actually sits on a whole lot of steps that you took to move yourself from mother to seductress before you could bring in that mastery of I am all of it.
Yeah, that's true. And part of those steps also looked like a practice of, like, putting the mother to bed. So, like, baby goes to bed, I have a shower with music, with a candle, with just practicing feeling my body and the sensation of water on my body or my fingers on my body, or, you know, because the whole day you're not even really feeling your body because you're so in your head, managing children, managing time, all of that. So you're right, it certainly came after a practice of learning
how to reach your seductress.
Yes.
Yeah. You got to learn how to seduce your seductress before she's going to start to play with you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's prioritizing your relationship. I know we're going to wrap up. And I will just say back on that is the point in staying in containers that keep you fresh, because or else all of us, if we stay where we're at and we never change, we are the result of the 5 people or the status quo that we spend the most time with. So if you want a different reality, then you better go put yourself in the space of people who are living a different reality. So they say to you, hey, babes, that's not true.
Yeah. And whoever you're around rubs off on you. Like, of course, 100% Julie rubs off on me. Of course, 100% I rub off on her. So areas where we're each empowered, we're going to each influence each other.
Yeah.
And so it's wise to ask yourself then, what are the gaps for me? And who can I put around me to take me where I want to go?
Right. Because you don't have to do this alone.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So a beautiful segue from that, Julie, is what can women learn about this in Honey Club?
So in Honey Club, you're with me for the first 3 weeks of every month, and we move through a life, love, and lover reconciliation process. So each week is a different theme or a different practice point, so it stays front of mind, and then we meet for a live call where I move you through a conscious journaling process, a movement process, and then a community call and coaching share. So it is a fantastic way for you to keep just alive in what it is to live a life where you're continuously saying, I love what I have and I want to create from a place of abundance more. And I would also pin here, you can do Queen School and return for live rounds that, like Bridgie was saying, just give you that hit for 5 weeks straight. And that's intense. And what can we do in reimagining motherhood with you?
So
reimagine intimacy.
Yeah. So I think what I find we do in reimagining motherhood is that we give life to the mother in motherhood and give strategies, give tools, give new ways of perceiving things so that you don't feel like you are being run into the ground or negating yourself in your motherhood, where there's no time for anything but your servitude or your work, or that, you know, that there's a place for you in your motherhood, and empowering whatever that looks like for you. If it's a season where you want to deepen your intimacy, or if you're in a relationship stuck place, then let's pull that apart a little. But it's really about how you show up consciously to yourself in motherhood and to your children and what they bring you, and how we can move with that.
You can find out more at bridgetwood.life and julietenner.love. And as always, we love your comments, we love your questions, we love your feedback. Like this beautiful listener, we really hope that you got a thing or two out of this that takes you just that next step on your journey, because that is absolutely our mission and purpose of this podcast. So you can always reach out to us at nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram.
Remember to nourish the woman, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.